Hi, I'm Cameron Larum, and I'm a Program Manager in the Windows and Windows Live International team. In Windows 8, we want to make it really easy for you to reach more markets by providing tools to help you localize your Windows 8 apps. This is the reason my team created the Multilingual App Toolkit. This cool, simple set of tools is a free download that integrates into Visual Studio 2012, including the Express for Windows 8 edition. Here, I'm in the integrated developer environment of Visual Studio Express 2012 for Windows 8 edition. I have already downloaded and installed the Multilingual App Toolkit from MSDN Dev Center for Windows 8 apps. This toolkit extends Visual Studio, making it easy to add multi-language support. Before we're able to take advantage of the Multilingual App Toolkit, our project needs localization to be enabled. Since we are creating a new project, the first step will be to update the project to use localized resources instead of hard-coded strings. So let's get started. We'll start by creating a new project using the JavaScript Windows Store grid app template provided by Visual Studio. Let's name the app Wolf. We are making 3 modifications to the newly created project. Add a res.json-based resource file, update the app to use localizable resources, add images to the app. To add localizable resources, we first need to create a locale-specific folder. For this demo, I'm writing my app with a source language of English, so I'll create an en-us folder. We'll now highlight the en-us folder and select Add New Item. In the Add New Item wizard, we'll select resourcesfile.res.json. This will add a resources.res.json file to the en-us folder. To save time, we'll copy and paste the app's desired resources into the resources.res.json file. As you can see, these are name value pairs that define the resources ID and content. Most of the modifications to the project to enable localization will happen in the data.js file. Let's open the data.js file so we can make the required modifications. First, we need to enable access to the resources via the resource loader. This is done by adding a variable to hold an instance of the resource loader. I'll use snippets that I previously defined to save time. Next, we'll move to the generate sample data function to hook up the resource loader calls. We'll remove the template's hard-coded strings, item content, item description, and group description. We'll replace their usage with localizable resources in a moment. Let's replace the default template images as well as those with some cute canines. While not required, this will spruce up the app a bit. We're replacing the light gray, medium gray, and dark gray images with references to our images. To save time, I'll use a snippet that I previously defined. There. We've already gathered the images we want to add. So let's add them to the project in the Images folder using the Add Existing Item menu. This will update some of the existing logo images as well. We'll confirm it's okay to overwrite those images. There. Now let's update the sample groups variable to load the strings from the resource loader instance. We will change the title, subtitle, description assignments. Now let's update the sample groups variable to load the strings from the resource loader instance. We'll repeat the modifications for the sample items variable as well. Again, we're changing the title, subtitle, description, and content assignments to call resloader.getString with the desired resource IDs. I'll use a snippet to apply these changes as well. As you can see from the code changes, each assignment is using the resource loader's getString call to dynamically load the resources at runtime. This is key to ensure the application uses localizable content. The app is now localization enabled. We're going to do a quick test to ensure that everything is working after our modifications by pressing F5 to build and run the app. As you can see, the app is using the updated images and resource-based strings. Now we are ready to add additional language support using the Multilingual App Toolkit. After selecting the project in the Solution Explorer, let's go to the Tools menu and select Enable Multilingual App Toolkit. There, you can see that the toolkit added a folder called Multilingual Resources. This is where the toolkit will provide all language file management for you. Let me show you how this works. We are going to add a second language to the project. So let's select the Project menu, then Add Translation Languages. This brings up a list of all Windows-supported languages. We are going to select German, Germany for this demo. Here we go. Now you see that we have added a file called german-germany.xlf under the Multilingual Resources folder. Let's open this file and take a quick look. This file is based on an industry standard XLIF schema to ensure your resources will be available to any translation source you choose. Let's rebuild the project, which will populate the German-Germany XLF file with the English resource strings in preparation for localization. The toolkit comes with a multilingual editor which provides machine translation using the Microsoft Translation Service. This is a great way to get translation suggestions for additional languages. Let's say we have a friend that has offered to translate the app for us. Using the IDE, we are able to select Send for Translation via the XLIF's Files context menu and email the German-Germany XLF file to our friend. When our friend receives the file, it will contain the attached translation file as well as a link to download the toolkit. Since our friend does not have Visual Studio installed, only the multilingual editor is installed on her machine. Once our friend has finished translating the strings into German, she can send the file back via email. The attachment has already been saved to a local folder. Using the IDE, we are able to select Import Translations via the XLIF Files context menu. Now we can use the import dialog to locate and import the German translation file. After the import is complete, let's open it in the Multilingual Editor to view the translations. As you can see, the translations were successfully imported. Let's close the editor and get ready to run the app in German for the first time. Before running the app in German, we need to make German the preferred language. I had previously added German to the list of preferred languages. Let's move German up as the main display language. There. Let's rebuild and run the solution. Cool! As you can see, after enabling localization for the project, we're able to create a multilingual app in a few simple steps. After some testing, we are ready to release the app containing both English and German to the Windows Store. It's that easy. To summarize, the Multilingual App Toolkit makes adding and managing translations easier for Windows 8 apps. The benefits are you can quickly expand your customer base and markets with additional languages. You can focus on development in the source language, while the toolkit provides multilingual resource support. You can easily include both human and machine translation support to manage your language quality requirements, and more. We hope that you find the Multilingual App Toolkit a powerful companion when building multilingual apps for Windows 8. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Brian Hauk, and I'm a software development engineer and test in the Windows and Windows Live International team. As we've shown you in previous videos, the Multilingual App Toolkit can help you develop international apps that can reach a broader set of markets. Pseudo-localization is a tool that allows you to test internationalization aspects of your app before incurring potentially costly translations. It works by using a fictitious language designed to include some of the most problematic characteristics of localized texts. Through supporting the concept of pseudo-localization, the Multilingual App Toolkit can help you validate that your app is truly ready for the world. Let me show you how the ability to use pseudo can help facilitate world readiness testing. While it is hidden from the user, pseudo is available to be selected as the preferred language in Windows 8. This is because pseudo can be a powerful test tool and that outside developers may wish to use it during development. To add it to your language list, you have to search for it by its language code, QPS PLOC. Next, I'm going to open Visual Studio Express 2012 Windows 8 Edition. I've already downloaded and installed the Multilingual App Toolkit. Both of these are available as free downloads from the MSD and Dev Center. Let's open a sample app project called Wolf. Now, let's go ahead and enable the Multilingual App Toolkit. Due to the value that pseudo-localization provides, you'll notice that this feature is enabled automatically. You see we have a file called pseudo-language sudo-xlif under the Multilingual Resources folder. This file acts like any other language to the app. Okay, now let's build the project. This will populate the sudo-xlif file with English source strings in preparation for translation. Let's go ahead and generate the actual pseudo translations. As you can see, the strings have been modified and are now pseudo translated. Looking at this first string, you can see we prepended a set of alphanumeric characters. These are a unique identifier for this resource. You can see we've embedded the source string in here, but we've added some enhancements to it via character substitution. This helps identify ASCII conversions that would cause problems in localized text. I'll show you why this is important coming up. Now let's run the solution so that we can take a look at what pseudo looks like in practice. One advantage of using pseudo is it makes it clear where you have strings that aren't exposed to localization. Usually this is because they've been hard-coded. You can see here we have strings that are displayed in English, which means they weren't available to the toolkit for translation. We know we need to fix the source code before we perform our actual translations, otherwise we'll miss these resources. Some strings, once translated, will vary in length dramatically from the source text. Pseudo-localization applies padding to its translations to ensure your app will be able to handle longer strings. Pseudo encloses the text in brackets, which makes it clear if a string has been truncated. You can see here we have a control that doesn't appropriately handle the increased text length. As a result, the string gets truncated. This is identified due to the missing closing bracket. Spotting issues like this will ensure your software is presenting text correctly, regardless of the translation. Unique identifiers are added to each string to allow testers to log defects on specific resources, even if the resource ID isn't available. Here, we have two different resources with the same text. Due to context, they may be translated differently depending on the language, which is why they've been split into two distinct resources. If a tester finds a problem in one of the resources, like a potential truncation, simply giving the text of the string doesn't identify the problem. In this case, all the tester needs to do is log the defect with the pseudo identifier, and it clarifies the issue. Here at Microsoft, we have internal test tools that rely extensively on pseudo identifiers to reduce testing costs and to simplify testing. To summarize, pseudo translations make it easy to pre-test your international app before paying for translations. The benefits to using pseudo are: find unlocalizable strings, which could potentially delay the project since more round trips to the translators will be required. Find where increased string lengths cause text truncations, which can severely diminish the user experience. Provide unique identifiers to the resources, which can allow testers to file more specific defects. We hope you find the pseudo translations provided by the Multilingual App Toolkit a powerful tool in testing multilingual apps for Windows 8. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Alessandro Capistrano, and I'm a program manager in the Windows and Windows Live International team. In Windows 8, we wanted to make it really simple for developers to create and Windows Store apps in multiple languages and reach more markets. This is why my team included a translation editor in the Multilingual App Toolkit. The standalone editor allows you, a friend, or a translation professional to manage and translate app UI strings manually, or use the integrated Microsoft Translation Cloud service. In this video, I'll show you how to use the multilingual editor to translate your app. Let's get started. I'll start in Visual Studio 2012, where I have already installed the Multilingual App Toolkit and opened the sample app project called Woof, used in other videos on this series. I want to send away the Brazilian Portuguese xlif file to a friend who will add it and send me back a translated xlif. I will right-click the Portuguese Brazilian xlif file in the Solution Explorer and choose the Send for Translation option, which brings up a dialog box that allows me to save the xlif to a file folder location or a mail recipient. I will choose Mail Recipient, which uses my default email client. Notice that the xlif file is automatically attached with instructions on how to download the toolset. My friend can click the link to download the Multilingual App Toolkit and install the Multilingual Editor. The editor can be installed as a standalone feature in Windows 7 or Windows 8 PCs and does not require Visual Studio to run. My friend successfully installed the Multilingual Editor and saved the email attachment to her local machine. Double-clicking Portuguese Brazilian xlif starts the editor and loads the xlif file. There, strings are now ready to be translated. For this demo, I'll act on my friend's behalf and translate this app to Portuguese. I'll go ahead and use the Microsoft Translation Cloud service to help me out here and translate one string. All I need to do is select a row and click the Translate button. Easy. The string was automatically translated, but also take notice of how the string translation state changed to Needs Review and the star was cleared from the red translation state signal. This indicates the translation is machine generated, and as such, it is advisable it undergoes a review by a human. I can also select Translate All from the service, and there we go, the file is completely translated with suggested text. As I review the machine-generated text, I find a translation I would like to improve. I'll simply click on the row I wish to modify and type. As I finalize the translation for this string, notice how the translation state value in Properties panel automatically changes from Needs Review to Translated, and the translation state signal changes from red to yellow. Translation states are a convenient feature to track the status of individual string translations in your xlif file. The translated state indicates I have manually edited this translation and still have an opportunity to review and change it if necessary. I feel pretty confident this is an appropriate translation and the spelling is right, so I'll go ahead and change the translation state to final. Notice how the translation state signal changes to yellow and green. Now, I discovered there are a couple of items I don't really need to have translated among the app resources. I'll simply click on the search box and type item, which is the term I wish to find. As I type, the editor will automatically highlight every row that contains the search keyword. I can also narrow down the strings displayed to only those containing the word item by using the filter text box. Microsoft Translation does an excellent job of translating this string, but I know it's used internally by my application and should not be translated. I will go ahead and revert this translation back to its original value and state by hitting the Reset button. Okay, the translation now matches the source string, the state changes back to new, and the translation state signal is back at red. Everything is in its right place. Another great feature found in the Multilingual Editor is the ability to queue translators and the Microsoft Translation Cloud service on which portions of a string should not be translated. Using the mouse pointer, I will go ahead and highlight the words item and content in these strings, and then click the Lock Selection button. There. Conversely, to clear a lock and the highlight, I can use the Unlock Selection button. Now, if I click again the Translate button, Notice how Microsoft Translation Cloud Service will preserve my selection in the translation. The developer can then import the new translations into the project to create a test localized build. Back in Visual Studio, I will right-click the Portuguese Brazil XLIF entry in the Solution Explorer and choose the Import Translations option. On the Import Translation file dialog box, I can navigate to the location where I saved the XLIF my friend translated and select Import. Bacana! Using the multilingual editor, my friend was able to translate my WOOF app to Brazilian Portuguese using Microsoft Translation Service as well as her own translations. Now that the translations have been imported, I can rebuild the solution and run it. To summarize, the Multilingual App Toolkit editor makes adding and managing translations easier for Windows Store apps. The benefits are: you can easily edit translations, manage states, and use the Microsoft Translation Cloud Service to increase your productivity. You can quickly expand your customer base and markets with added languages and more. Thank you. We hope you find the Multilingual App Toolkit a powerful companion to build amazing multilingual apps for Windows 8.
Hi, I'm Sarah Thomas, and I'm a Senior Program Manager in the Windows International team. As we've shown you in previous videos, the Multilingual App Toolkit can help you develop international apps that can reach a broader set of markets. In this video, I'll show you a few things you should think about as you upload your multilingual app to the Windows Store to make sure your app is available in the right markets. Let's get started. First, let's go to the Windows Store Dev Center and look at our dashboard. I already have my Windows Store developer account set up, and I'm logged in. As you can see, I've already started the process of uploading my app to the store, so I'll choose Edit to continue the process. You'll choose Submit an App the first time you visit this page. I've reserved my app name, so let's continue with the Selling Details section. First, we'll pick a price tier. There's several articles and blog posts in the MSDN Windows Dev Center that discuss pricing your app. I encourage you to use those resources to become familiar with the options available to you. To keep things simple, I'm going to release WOOF as a free app, so I'll select that from the drop-down list. Now you see a big list of all the supported markets for the Windows Store. You'll need to determine which markets you want your app to be available in. There's a lot to consider, so let's take WOOF through this process. We have WOOF localized in English and German, so let's switch over to look at WOOF in Visual Studio. I have the project already loaded. When we look at the Add Translation Languages dialog, I can expand the German language to see the list of locales that are relevant for this language. Here you can see several locales for the German language. This information will help you decide the markets you want to support based on the languages you included in your app. Let's go back to the Windows Store dashboard and start choosing markets. Now, for the sake of this video, I'm intentionally oversimplifying the process of properly evaluating which markets are best for your particular app. Considering our German language support, let's choose Austria and Germany. Liechtenstein was next on the list, but it isn't a currently supported market in the Windows Store, so we'll skip that. Here's Luxembourg and Switzerland. Our app is also in English, so let's choose a few markets where we want to make WOOF available for folks who speak English. I'll just choose Canada and the United States for now. Again, this is just an example of how to choose markets. You can evaluate and decide which markets you want to include based on your supported languages. Keep in mind that language may not be the only deciding factor when choosing markets. If, for example, you develop tax preparation software based on United States tax code, this may not be relevant to users in Canada, even though they speak English. Feel free to consider releasing your app in more markets, whether you support that market's primary language or not. For example, a Spanish app could be very successful in the United States, considering the number of Spanish-speaking people in the US. There are a lot of multilingual examples like this all over the world, and you should find what works best for you and your app. Let's finish up this section by choosing to release WOOF as soon as it passes certification, and choose a category where it will be listed in the store. I'm going to select Entertainment. I'll leave these hardware requirements with the default selections, since we don't require DirectX versions or need to limit use based on available memory. And we haven't included any accessibility specific features, so I'll leave that checkbox blank and click Save. We don't have any advanced features, so in this section, we'll just accept the default settings by pressing Save. Let's move on to age rating and rating certificates. Now you can read about the details for each rating here. I'm going to choose 12 plus as our rating. Woof is not a game, but if you are developing a game app that you wish to release in multiple markets, be sure to read this section and understand the different country and region requirements for game apps. As you can see, some countries and regions require specific rating certifications. We're finished with this section, so I'll click Save. We haven't included any cryptography or encryption in our app, so I previously completed the declaration for this section. So now we're ready to build and upload our app package to the store. Back in Visual Studio, I need to disable the pseudo language before I can create the app package. You can do this by right-clicking the pseudo language xlif file and choose Exclude from Project. You can re-enable this later by clicking the Show All Files button, right-clicking your xlif file again, and choose Include in Project. Now I will select Store and create app packages. Yes, I want to build packages to upload to the Windows Store. Now I'll sign in to connect with my developer account. I'll select Woof, click Next, and then Create. Once our app package creation is complete, we need to verify our app using the Windows App Certification Kit. When I click the Launch Windows App Certification Kit button, the kit will launch the app several times as it completes its validation. The screen advises you not to interact with your app or the kit during this time. I'd recommend just sitting back and waiting for this process to complete. Okay, great, we passed. I'll click Finish. Now I'll go back to the Windows Store dashboard and click on Packages. I have an Explorer window open where Visual Studio placed my AppX upload package, and I'll drag and drop it here and click Save. Now we have an opportunity to write a description for Woof and include screenshots for our app. We have 2 languages, so we'll be doing this twice. We'll start with English and do German next. I'll click on English. I'll enter some very simple information here to complete the demo, but I encourage you to click on all these question marks and see more information about how to complete these sections and market your app. Visual Studio includes a great screenshot capturing tool for this section. So let's switch back to Visual Studio. I'll click on Store and Capture Screenshots. This will launch a simulator where I can see my app and use the tool to capture the screenshots. I'll click this little camera to capture the main page of our app. Back on the Windows dashboard, I'll click Add Image and navigate to the location in my Pictures folder where I can see my screenshot. I'll add a quick description, add info to the other mandatory fields, and I'll fill in the rest later. Now I'll click Save so I can show you the German page. Let's click on German. I didn't want my German app to show up in the Windows Store with an English description, so I had my German-speaking friend translate my description already. I'll copy and paste that now. I want my screenshots to be in German too, so let's get those. Inside my simulator, I need to change my language. In the language preference window, I need to add German. And then move that up as my preferred language. Now back in Visual Studio, I'll launch the screenshot simulator again, and we'll see our app in German. I can click the camera again to capture that screenshot. Back in the dashboard, I'll use the same process to add my image. And my German friend translated the description as well. Again, I'll fill in this mandatory field and click Save. If you have people who will review your app, you can enter notes for them here. I'll just click Save to move on. Now I'm ready to click Submit for certification and get my app into the Windows Store. As I mentioned, there are a lot of things to consider when preparing to submit your localized app to the Windows Store. I hope this video helped you understand a few of those considerations and showed you how you can upload your multilingual app to the store and start reaching customers all over the world. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Craig Brockschmidt. I work as a program manager in the Windows ecosystem team. My teammates and I supported developers in creating the first third-party Windows Store apps in early 2012. Through that experience, we learned that there are a number of aspects to the platform that aren't always visible, but very essential for building a great app. For while an app, like a home, could be stunningly beautiful, it can at the same time be thoroughly uncomfortable to live in. And you certainly want your apps to be a place that consumers want to spend many, many hours. Here in Part 1, we'll look at aspects that are visible, but not all that glamorous. To draw an analogy, if you were designing a home, you might focus much of your attention on the noticeable things: windows, paint colors, flooring, cabinets, and the lighting and plumbing fixtures. But then there are all those things that matter just as much, but aren't so obvious: the windowsills, baseboards, door hinges, switches, and the little transitions between different types of flooring. When you look at the whole house, these may not be the big-ticket items, but they matter just as much in creating the whole experience. For instance, when you upload an app to the store, you'll be asked for a number of promotional screenshot graphics. As these aren't part of the app package itself, they're easy to forget, yet they are often consumers' first experience of your app. So be aware of these and give your artists time to produce them. Logos, similarly, represent your app in the store, on the start screen, and within lists of apps to fulfill contracts. They may be small, but they are very visible and should be clear and crisp. Tiles, for their part, are the face of your app on the start screen and in various places where your app might appear in lists, like the search and share contract. And the moment a user taps a tile or otherwise activates your app, your splash screen appears for at least 3/4 of a second. I like to think of this as a branded hourglass, and through an extended splash screen, a page of your own that you display if you need more time for the app to get started, you can not only inform the user of loading progress, but also entertain and delight them. With charms, the big thing to remember is that users will invoke them when your app is in the foreground, either in the full screen or the filled state. So the question becomes, what do you do with them? It's highly likely that as consumers install and use more apps, they'll be increasingly dissatisfied with apps that don't use these to their fullest capacity, which means you're opening advantages for competitors. In short, really think of these from the consumer's point of view, anticipate their expectations, then fulfill those expectations. With search, ask yourself if your app has anything that can be searched. If the app has collections or lists of any kind, the answer really must be yes. And with search that can be invoked for your app even while you're not running, make sure that the app's activation path has been tested for startup in response to the contract. Similarly, if you have any data that a consumer might think should be shareable, become a share source. The last thing you want is for users to turn away from your app because you don't allow them to share their experience with others. Devices is akin to sharing, not to other people, but to hardware like media receivers and printers. The first clearly is important for media apps, while printing is important for apps with documents and other printable data. As for settings, this serves as a convenient home for managing configurations, logins, preferences, license agreements, terms of service, and so forth, allowing you to eliminate the need to have such pages in your app, its navigating hierarchy, and its commanding UI. Now, while it's very natural to design an app around its full-screen landscape view, remember that consumers can put any page of your app into any view state at any time. Apps need to be prepared then to show in full-screen landscape, yes, but also filled, snapped, and full-screen portrait views. This means consciously designing each and every page for each view state. While this may sound like a lot of extra work, you're not designing 4 completely different apps. View states are really just about the visibility of elements and their layout. View states never change the mode of an app. For example, in Snap View, it's typical to show one-dimensional vertical lists rather than two-dimensional horizontally panning ones. Some apps, like games, may need to simply pause themselves in Snap View, but pausing is not, again, a mode change. For other apps, like a movie player, it's appropriate to lock the orientation as well, in which case a view state like portrait doesn't apply. But this is a way to fulfill consumer expectations, not an excuse for laziness. Finally, it's not necessary to have all kinds of hardware on which to test view states. You can use the simulator in Visual Studio to test rotations. The device controls in Blend for Visual Studio also lets you test view states directly in the designer. Speaking of the simulator and Blend, both tools also allow you to test against various screen sizes, from a 1024 by 768 to 2560 by 1440 screens, and across pixel densities of 100%, 140%, and 180%. As with some of the other features we've talked about, your app will be run on different screen sizes and pixel densities, so it's vital that you test these scenarios and implement for them appropriately. How you handle different screen sizes depends on your content. Apps with variable content should show more. Apps with fixed content, like games, will generally scale their content instead. For varying pixel densities, try to use vector graphics as much as possible, in which case you don't have to worry about the differences at all. If you have raster graphics, on the other hand, you want to avoid having these automatically scaled by providing specific images for each scale factor, especially for your tiles, logos, and the splash screen. Fortunately, Windows also provides an automatic resource lookup mechanism if you simply name your files in a consistent manner, as with .scale-100, .scale-140, and .scale-180 suffixes to the file names. And again, let your graphic designers know of these requirements ahead of time so they can provide all the assets. While you should have a great static tile, live tiles are even better as they provide value to the user even while the app isn't running, though it needs to run at least once. You can have Windows periodically ask a service for a tile update at 15-minute intervals or longer, or you can set up a service that sends updates to the Windows notification service, which will then be sent to every device where your app has configured its tile to receive them. In this context, we highly recommend looking into the Windows Azure Toolkit and Windows Azure Mobile Services for the creation of your service. Beyond your primary tile, secondary tiles are app bookmarks, and enabling them encourages consumers to populate their start screen with entry points into your app, especially as secondary tiles can be live just like the primary one. Notifications are also a way to alert consumers to important events. However, be judicious in your use of them, because if you make too many notifications, or trivial ones, the user can turn them off for your app entirely, which defeats the purpose. On the subject of tiles, by the way, be aware of the Show Name option in the manifest. If your app name appears in your tiles, set this to No Logo, since you don't need the system-provided text. Localization and accessibility are two other areas where the user has control and your app should respond accordingly. Both of them are really ways to extend your app's reach to a wider audience. Users in different locales will appreciate apps that are available in their native language and honor their regional conventions. Similarly, a majority of users, 60%, actually use accessibility features in some capacity. With localization, check out the Multilingual App Toolkit for Visual Studio that is available from Microsoft, which greatly simplifies the localization process for Windows Store apps. The Windows SDK also contains tools called Inspect and the UI Accessibility Checker, which will test your app under the kinds of conditions that users can control in the Ease of Access Center. It's also a good idea to test your app directly with different contrast settings, different types of input, and even to turn on Narrator and try to use your app with your eyes closed. As with all these tips, consumers will very much appreciate your consideration. The final suggestion that I'll make in this presentation is to acknowledge that users will run your apps on slow networks and slow devices, meaning that your app might not always run as fast as it does on your souped-up development machines with great broadband. To be again considerate, use progress indicators to let users know that potentially long operations are happening. Otherwise, a blank screen that lasts more than 2 seconds gives the idea that the app is hung, and users are likely to switch to another one. Windows provides built-in progress indicator controls in both linear and ring styles, which are very easy to use. Even so, making the effort to use progress indicators also gives you an opportunity to see if you can actually eliminate them. While this won't be possible in all cases, it certainly helps your app to appear all the more responsive, and we'll talk more about this in Part 2. And with that, I wish you all the best in your efforts to build great apps, and especially invite you to watch Part 2 of this presentation, where we'll cover additional areas that are even less visible, but still important to apps that really work. Hello again. My name is Craig Brockschmidt. I work as a program manager in the Windows ecosystem team, and I'd like to welcome you to the second in this two-part series on aspects of the Windows 8 platform that aren't always visible, but very essential for building great apps. In part 1, we looked at those aspects that are visible, but not all that glamorous, like those secondary elements in a home that don't get as much attention as the obvious stuff. Here in part 2, we'll explore other aspects that may not be visible at all, but will manifest in ways that consumers will definitely experience. Imagine, for example, if the light switches and faucets in your home worked some of the time or not at all. While you'd learn to tolerate these things, you'd probably take the first opportunity to live somewhere better. Similarly, while your app might work okay without paying attention to some of these details, your competition will see these as opportunities to outshine you and invite consumers to live in their apps instead. For starters, your app will experience differing input capabilities, and Windows Store policy requires that apps must be usable with only touch, only mouse, and only keyboard. These considerations are also important for accessibility. Fortunately, you get all of this for free when you use built-in controls, and because those controls provide extensive styling capabilities, they should serve nearly all of your needs. Pointer unification also means that you don't have to differentiate mouse, touch, and stylus input unless you need to, which is very convenient. With the keyboard, while controls handle keyboard events automatically, you should think through page-to-page navigation with the keyboard as well as navigation between controls, typically using the Tab key. As for sensors, I highly recommend thinking of sensors as a form of input when they are available, because they reveal the relationships between the device and the physical world, both how it's positioned in and how it's moving through that world. Managing credentials is another one of those things that many apps need to do and is certainly not glamorous. Yet doing this well can mean the difference between an app that consumers love and one that they despise. Now, if you collect credentials in the app, store them in the password vault using the Password Vault API. Once there, you can retrieve them without a prompt when the same user is logged into Windows. But do remember to allow the user to manage their login through the Settings panel. Single sign-on with a Microsoft account is a feature of the Live SDK. It means that when a user logs into Windows with a Microsoft account, they don't need to enter credentials again or create accounts for any app that also uses it. Even if, as shown here, the user is logged into Windows using other credentials, like a domain login, the first app that uses single sign-on will have the prompt shown automatically, after which no apps need to ask. Users can even eliminate this prompt by linking their domain credentials to the Microsoft account. To optimize battery life, among other things, Windows 8 itself manages the lifetime of Windows Store apps, suspending those that are in the background, except in specific scenarios, so they don't consume resources. While suspended, Windows might also unload an app from memory entirely if more memory is needed by a foreground app. At the same time, Windows wants it to appear to the consumer as if those apps were never closed, meaning that when the app restarts, it should have the same state as it did previously. So when an app is suspended, it should save its state. If Windows later terminates the app to free memory, it remembers that fact and tells the app to reload that state the next time it started. If, on the other hand, the user switches back to a suspended app, all its memory structures are in place, so it just starts running again. However, since any amount of time has passed, from less than a second to hours, weeks, or months, an app may need to refresh some of its data, especially that which comes from online sources. It might also need to refresh server sessions if timeout periods have been exceeded, or update live tiles. Now, there are a number of places where an app can save its session state in its app data folder, specifically local, temp, and roaming areas. Each of these allow you to save files in any format as well as manage key value pairs of settings. Local and temp areas are great for storing session state, local caches, transient files, and expanding compressed data in your app package to their runtime formats. Just remember that temp state is subject to the disk cleanup tool, so you shouldn't store anything there that your app really depends upon. Use it instead for caches that can be restored again at runtime. With roaming, Windows 8 adds an exciting feature whereby roaming app state up to 100K is automatically duplicated on other devices where the same consumer is logged in. This helps create transparent app experiences as the consumer moves between those devices. Some great uses of this are to roam email account settings, user configuration settings like a profile picture, the viewing position of a video, the reading position in a book or magazine, progress in a game, saved searches, and so on. Many settings that appear in an app's setting panels are often good candidates for roaming. On the other hand, navigation state, the last used search, most recently opened files or other such lists, and any settings that are specific to the device, its hardware characteristics, and its file system should not be roamed because they won't mean anything on the other device. Similarly, there's no need to roam data that was acquired from an online source because it would have to be downloaded one way or the other and could otherwise risk exceeding the 100K limit. Speaking of networks and data transfer, it's very important to remember that network connectivity can vary throughout the lifetime of your app. Here are some important questions to ask. What happens if your app starts without an active network, both from the tile and through contracts? What happens if your app is run the first time without connectivity? What happens if connectivity is lost while the app is running? What happens when connectivity comes back? What happens when the connection changes, as with speed, cost, and so forth? And what is your offline experience? In short, since devices with your running app can move in and out of different networks, some of which may be metered and others not, try to think through the user's experience with such changes and respond well in your app. It's actually a requirement in the store's certification policy that you prevent a bill shock by not doing large data transfers on metered networks and being aware of when the user's data limit on such a network might be exceeded. Having a great offline experience brings up the question of caching data in general, as it can very much improve the performance and thus user perception of an app. In part 1 of this talk, we discussed making use of progress indicators when the user may have to wait more than 2 seconds for an operation to complete. With caching, we can rephrase the question to be, can the need for those progress indicators be mostly eliminated? You can also ask just how fast you can make the transition between pages. Consider a common scenario where the consumer will likely want to go quickly back and forth between a list of results and detail pages for different items in that list. As a first level of optimization, cache the list results so that the app doesn't have to perform the same search or download again when it's going back to that page, though it could if it's been a long time since those results were obtained. A second optimization is to not actually navigate between pages at all. That is, tapping an item in the list can just show details on top of the list, either using a flyout UI or just obscuring the list page entirely. When the user goes back or dismisses the flyout then, the list page is already fully constructed. Alternately, you might dispense with the navigation altogether and use a split view instead, also known as a master detail view. Speaking of lists, our final topic is virtualizing lists and optimizing their performance. Unlike other controls, lists can become arbitrarily large, since they are made to accommodate any number of items. At the same time, any given device can only show so many items at one time, so it's not necessary to retrieve all the items at once. List virtualization is a means to demand load each virtual list of the page. The list control notifies the app when it's been scrolled or panned to a particular page, at which time the app only needs to load the items for that page. The app can also delay load media like images and video, which allows the user to pan quickly through the page without waiting for all that media to download each time. It's also helpful with lists to sometimes separate managing the data from rendering the control that projects the data, and to manage your own data binding. Performance is also greatly improved by minimizing the rendering time for each item, especially if you implement your own functions for that rendering. So in closing, we've seen in both parts of this talk many considerations that will help your apps become highly responsive to various user actions that don't come directly to your app, and also responsive and optimized for various conditions that your app will encounter during its lifetime. And again, I wish you all the best in your efforts to build apps that are beautiful, yes, but go beyond just beautiful.
Hello, my name is Bonnie Lau, and I'm a Senior Program Manager on the Windows User Experience team. Today I'm going to talk about the 8 traits of a Windows Store app. The first trait is the Microsoft design style. The key to the Microsoft design language is the concept of content before Chrome. Whether you're designing a shopping, a food and dining, a media, a social, or any categories of app, content is at the heart of that experience. As app designers, by leaving the most relevant elements on screen, we help people be immersed in the things they love, your content. This is a typical newsreader app. Let's take a look at how we can remove the Chrome and let the content shine. First, start by removing the lines, boxes, and some of the effects, such as gradient, which detract from the content. Make use of typography to create a clear information hierarchy in your content. Using a small, consistent set of font sizes organizes the content and creates a relationship and order. Instead of cluttering the app's canvas with controls, we can leverage the edge. Commands can be placed in the app bar, which can be reviewed on demand by swiping from the bottom or the top edge of the screen. By making use of the app bar, not only do we clear up the interface to give focus on the content, people can confidently use the app because they can consistently find commands under one roof. The second trait is be fast and fluid. Motion is the core part of the Microsoft design language. Animation is more than just visual adornment. It provides information by illustrating what is happening and reinforcing concepts. Many animations are built into the standard platform controls, but additionally, there's an animation library that provides animations tailored for common app scenarios. Because these animations are used throughout the system, they help users know what behaviors to expect and reinforce concepts in the interface. Windows Store apps are designed to be touch first. Follow the Windows 8 touch language, which is a set of simple, direct gestures. These interactions are provided to you in standard platform controls to help you create an experience that feels fast and fluid, without needing to learn about special modes or memorizing gestures. Use those and you are set. Snap and scale beautifully. With Windows 8, your app has the opportunity to be used on hundreds of millions of PC with a variety of form factors and screen sizes. Start with a minimum screen resolution of 1024 by 768. Consider what your app would look like on a larger screen and take advantage of the additional screen real estate to show your users more content. It's easy on Windows 8 to multitask by snapping, and a great snap state invites users to keep your app on screen longer. Design a useful and compelling snap state that maintains users' context. Contracts are the glue that binds the apps together. The share contract lets any app share data with any other app. A source app is the one which provides something to share. A target app is an app being shared to. Every app should be a shared source. For example, a photo app can share an image, a news app can share an article, a game can share a high score. Apps that let people publish, store, or edit content are good candidates to being a shared target. For example, social, chat, note-taking, bookmarking, cloud services, image editors should be shared targets to help users more easily pass on content. The search contract lets people search your app from anywhere in Windows. Use this instead of your own search UI. The result will display in your app so that you can control your experience. Invest in a great tile. Tiles are the front door to your experience. Treat them as an extension to your app, and invest in designing them to highlight your content and your brand personality. Feel connected and alive. Use live tiles to draw people into your app with dynamic, relevant, and personalized content. Fresh content helps people connect with your app and give them reasons to place your tile in a prominent position on start and to launch your app time and again. For information that is time sensitive and must be interruptive, you can use notifications to help people quickly navigate back to the relevant context in your app. Roam to the cloud. Leverage the roaming ability provided through the platform to create a continuous and fluid experience. Every app gets per user cloud storage for settings, state, and a small amount of user content that they can roam with a Microsoft account. Embrace the Microsoft design principles. Do more with less. Show content before Chrome to let people focus on what matters. Pride in craftsmanship. Details in visual styling, layout, and typography matters. Be fast and fluid. Design for touch with motion and ergonomics in mind. Authentically digital. Be connected and alive with live tiles and notifications and roam to the cloud. Win as one. Use contracts to work together with other apps to complete scenarios. These principles form a framework when you are making decisions around the flow and interactions of your app. To learn more about each of the above topics, see the additional reference links here. Thank you.
Hi, I'm John Gordner. I'm a program manager on the Windows team, and I'm going to talk to you about how you can design your app to take advantage of the Windows features and patterns that will help you make your app shine. When starting to design a Windows 8 app, the most important thing to do is to pick out a best at statement. To create one, answer the question, this app is the best app in its category at what? Every decision you make from here on out should be based on that statement, so it's important that it's clear, specific, and truly differentiated. It's not enough to say your news app will be the best app in its category because it shows the most recent news when the user wants it. Unless that is somehow able to get more recent news than every other news app, then your app isn't going to be differentiated enough. So take the time to come up with a great best at statement, because many of your decisions, from what features you build to how you lay out the content in your app, will be based on it. After you have a best at statement, the first thing to think about is the landing page. Immediately after launching your app, every user should know what your app is about and why they should bother spending time in it. I've just launched the XE app, and just by panning through the landing page, I can see exactly what this app is trying to be best at. XE has designed this app to be the best app in the travel category at quickly comparing exchange rates between your currencies. XE has done a fantastic job of implementing the features it needs to deliver on the promise that is made with the best at statement. The first section in the landing page allows me to quickly compare exchange rates between my favorite currencies. I can even enter specific amounts and see how that translates into various currencies. As I continue to pan, and I can browse for other currencies to add to my favorites. If I know exactly what I'd like to find, I can use semantic zoom to quickly jump to exactly where I want to go. You can rely on semantic zoom as the way for users to navigate any big list in your app. Simply by interacting with the primary content on the landing page, I can choose my favorite currencies and easily compare the rates between them. In fact, that's all I can do from the landing page, and that's a good thing. When designing their app, XE was laser focused on what it needed to be best at, and removed everything else that might distract from it. Of course, there are some features that are still necessary for truly delivering on the best at statement. However, some of those features aren't going to be used as often. To provide this important but infrequently used functionality, this app relies on on-demand UI. If I simply select a currency, I can remove it from my favorites or pin it to start. These features are still a core part of the best at statement, but just won't be used as often as the core functionality of comparing exchange rates, so it's available on demand and out of the way when the user doesn't need it. The XE app is a great example of reducing the features in an app to just what is required to deliver on the best at statement and no more. If a feature doesn't help make your app great, then it's simply distracting from it. In Windows, less is more. By focusing on its best at statement, XE was able to take advantage of Windows features like horizontal scrolling with semantic zoom, selection, and UI on demand with the app bar to create a great, focused user experience that helps it shine in its category. But what if an app is more complicated? How do you still keep it simple while providing rich functionality? The Sports app is an example of a complicated app that perfectly exemplifies the idea of less is more. It is a one-stop shop for the sports information you want across all of your sports. Panning through the landing page, you can easily see what the app is about and why you should use it. You can see top news stories and schedules across your favorite teams. As soon as I open the app, I'm tempted to explore by the immediate and beautiful presentation of content. I can stumble upon an article and go straight to it, learn about upcoming games, and drill into a specific game if I want to know more. If I want more news, I can simply click on the title to see the full list. Browsing an app should be like reading a newspaper or walking through my favorite bookstore. Just by browsing through, I can discover something delightful. If I want to go to a specific section, I can, but I don't have to. Great Windows apps allow users to focus on where they are now, not where they can go later. This is how users can be pulled into your app and why they will want to come back. Let users immerse themselves in your beautiful content by exploring, and then, if they know what they want to do something specific, then let them. Earlier, we talked about UI on demand. That's how users can bring up UI that is available when they need it, but doesn't distract from their immersive experience when they don't. The app bar is a way to add features on demand to your app. The app bar at the bottom of the screen is great for commands that users might want to use. The app bar on the top of the screen is great for letting users navigate to different sections of your app. If I know I want to look at some football rather than browsing the sports app generally, I can swipe from the top or bottom and jump straight to the NFL section of the app. From here, I can, just like on the landing page, browse, discover, and be delighted by all the content that represents what the NFL section in the sports app is best at. I can do this because I'm not distracted by teasers of all the other sports I'm not really interested in right now, or with a table of contents advertising the rest of the app. If I want to go back, I can use the back button in the top left, or using the top app bar. But for now, it's all about letting me get pulled into the content that I'm looking at. In Windows 8, less is more. Identify what the core of your app is. Every decision you make should center on what your app, a page, a section, or even a piece of content is trying to do best. Then remove everything else, because it's just a distraction. Start by creating a specific best at statement, and stick to it whenever you make a design decision. Let users focus on where they are now and not where they can go later, and make the rest of your functionality available to users on demand using app bars. With those principles in mind, get creative. We're looking forward to seeing what you come up with.
Hi, I'm Doug Kirshner, and I work on accessibility in Windows. When you're designing your app, it's important to think about all of the people who will use it, including those with disabilities such as visual, mobility, hearing, and cognitive impairments. In the United States alone, 36 million people have a disability, and worldwide that figure is estimated around 1 billion. By ensuring your app is accessible to people with disabilities, you can reach a significantly larger customer base and ensure that no one is excluded from being able to use your app. Windows 8 includes a platform for building accessible apps, as well as features to enable users with disabilities to use those accessible apps. In this video, I'll demonstrate 3 things that can make or break the accessibility of your app. This includes testing your app with high contrast, making sure you can completely control your app using the keyboard, and exposing your app's data and functionality in a way that is available to people using assistive technologies. First, let's look at high contrast. For people who have difficulty seeing the screen, high contrast is a setting in Windows that makes it easier to read text and images. To make sure that people with low vision can see your app, you should make sure your app displays all of its text and images clearly when high contrast mode is enabled. Fortunately, most high contrast bugs are easy to find visually by turning on high contrast and then running your app. Next, let's talk about keyboard navigation, which is essential for people with visual or mobility impairments who don't use the mouse. To support keyboard navigation means that a user can control all of the functionality of your app using only a keyboard. Consider a person with limited mobility who cannot use his or her hands. In this case, the person may control the computer using the accessibility on-screen keyboard. For example, the person might enable scan mode, which allows him or her to completely drive the computer using only a single input switch, such as a foot pedal, or by blowing into a tube, depending on the individual's abilities. Another reason why keyboard navigation is important is for people who are blind and using screen readers such as Narrator. A person who is blind may completely rely on the physical keys of the keyboard to access the app. Keyboard navigation allows the person to move around, for example using tab and arrow keys. Then to activate or select an item, he or she can press Enter or space. Lastly, many people simply prefer keyboard navigation as a way of using the system. So, by ensuring good keyboard navigation in your app, you'll make sure that no one is excluded from using your app, and you'll also be making the overall experience better for everyone. The final element of accessibility I'll talk about today is programmatic access. This is about making sure the accessibility data exposed by your app is correct and complete. A person who is blind, for example, can use Narrator in Windows 8 to control the computer and hear what's on the screen.
Deleted items. Junk. 5 of outbox. Sent items. Drafts. Inbox. Selected from Microsoft. New. %1. Button. 2. Editable combo box.
In this example, I'm using Narrator touch gestures to move around the screen and activate items. Narrator relies entirely on programmatic accessibility data to make this possible. For more information about Narrator, be sure to check out the video in this section that goes into detail on how to use and design with Narrator in mind. Another example where programmatic accessibility is important is for speech recognition. A person who is mobility impaired may rely on speech to control the system. Windows 8 includes Windows speech recognition to enable users to control the machine only by speaking. In this example, Windows speech recognition relies on programmatic accessibility data to identify and activate items based on voice commands. Start. Bing. Show numbers. 1. OK. Windows 8. Search. Microsoft Windows. In this video, I've given a broad overview of why high contrast, keyboard navigation, and programmatic access are important to making sure that everyone can use your app while allowing you to reach a broader customer base. For more information on how to build accessible apps, check out the more detailed video topics in this section. Thank you. Hi, I'm Doug Kirshner and I work on accessibility in Windows. In this video, I'm going to talk about how people who are blind can use Narrator in Windows 8 to access their machines, and how you, as an app developer, can better design your app to work well with Narrator. Hopefully by now you've seen the accessibility overview and other videos in this section around keyboard navigation and programmatic access, both of which form the foundation of a good Narrator experience. In this video, I'll focus on some additional design aspects not covered in those topics. These considerations ensure not only that people can technically access your app using Narrator, but also that people have a great customer experience with your app. First, I'll show you how keyboard navigation design can improve the experience for customers using Narrator. To start with, I'll launch Narrator using the shortcut Windows Enter.
Start menu. Pane. Focus on weather. Calendar.
Once Narrator is running, the tab and arrow keys allow me to move around the items on the screen.
Mail. Calendar. Photos. Weather.
When I find something interesting, I can use space or enter to activate it. On the start screen, space will allow me to select the tile, and then I can use the arrows to move through the various options.
Weather. Unpin. Uninstall. Smaller. Turn light. Switch to all apps. Account picture button. Weather. Selected.
Or instead, I can press enter to open the app.
Weather. 55 degrees. Redmond. Cloudy. 71 degrees. Weather window.
Here is an example of how I can use tab to jump around the major items on the screen, and then arrow keys and other Narrator commands to move within those regions.
55 W. Read for time. Data for temperature. Temperature.
So now I'm using arrow keys to move through the items in the list.
Precipitation. Precipitation.
Making sure you have an efficient keyboard design for moving around and activating is important for being able to effectively use any app, and it's an easy way to build a good Narrator experience.
January. February. March. September. Not on table. Average high. Column 1 row 1. Average low. Record high. Record low. 36 degrees. 1950.
Next, I'll talk about how people can use Narrator on a touchscreen. I'll launch Narrator by holding the Windows button and pressing the volume up button.
Starting Narrator.
Once Narrator is running, I can touch anywhere on the screen and Narrator will read out the item under my finger.
Maps, SkyDrive, Maps, Photos. Double tap to activate.
But I can also use gestures to move around and find the items automatically. And for people who are blind, this way is often the preferred method for learning how to use a new app.
Weather, Internet, Store, Store. Double tap
To move around the different items, I can flick left and right.
Launch Store.
To interact with items, I can use double tap and triple tap gestures.
6 row 1. Store window. Focus on.
The order that Narrator moves around the screen is defined by the logical order of the app. For an HTML-based app, that means Narrator will move around based on the order of the app's DOM.
Explorable, Store, Editable, Back button, Find, Write a review, Link, Average rating, Slider at 23 ratings. Free. Install button, when you install an app, Terms of use, Link.
In this way, the logical structure of your app will determine the order in which people using Narrator will experience your app. So to make sure your customers who use Narrator can get around easily, make sure that the logical structure of your app is consistent with the visual layout. The other important aspect to having a good touch navigation experience with Narrator is making sure the correct items are accessible and that there aren't too many extra items. If there are lots of irrelevant items, it's going to be a tedious and confusing experience for customers navigating your app.
Start menu, page, mail window, focus.
To make sure that you're exposing the correct set of interesting items to Narrator, here are a few things you can do. First, you can make sure that your control types are exposed properly. For example, by setting ARIA roles on the meaningful items in your app. In this example, there is a list containing a number of emails. Narrator knows that the list container itself is not interesting, but that the items within it are, based on the roles assigned to each item.
Deleted items from Windows, from Microsoft.
Second, especially with HTML and JavaScript, sometimes you may build complex elements out of many sub-elements. For example, each email in this inbox is a list item that contains several different labels.
From Outlook.com team, subject Outlook.com can make your life easier with a few simple.
Sometimes these sub-elements are not meaningful except to provide a better look. For these types of situations, you can use ARIA to define what should and should not be exposed to the assistive technology. In this example, the Mail app uses ARIA to give each email a single name and to hide the inner structure of the control from assistive technologies. This makes the experience much smoother and simpler for people using Narrator.
From Windows Phone, subject how to install Campus Experience. From Windows Phone, from Outlook, from Microsoft.
These are a few design considerations to help you ensure that people using Narrator have a great experience with your app. For more information on the basics of enabling programmatic access and using keyboard navigation, be sure to check out the corresponding videos in this section. And of course, if you're interested in learning more about what Narrator can do, check out the Narrator help included in Windows 8. Thank you.